The signal reached the inner human networks at the edge of the quiet cycle, when most worlds were asleep and only automated stations watched the stars. It was weak, broken, and repeated the same message again and again in many trade languages. The words were simple. A coalition of worlds was dying. A sickness was spreading faster than their doctors could stop it. They asked for help. They asked for medicine. They asked for mercy. On Earth, a message appeared on a wide screen inside a calm, white room. Ambassador Day Park stood with his hands behind his back, eyes fixed on the data flowing past. He was not old, but his face carried the stillness of someone who had learned patience the hard way. Beside him stood Mira Han, a medical liaison sent by the United Health Command. Her jaw was tight as she read the casualty estimates. "Millions already lost," she said quietly. "And the numbers are rising." Day nodded once. "They waited too long to ask." "They were afraid," Myra replied. "If they invited foreign fleets, their neighbors would see it as weakness." Across the room, Seok Lim leaned over a separate console. He was an intelligence officer, thin and sharp-eyed, with fingers that never seemed to stop moving. He was not listening to the spoken words. He was listening to the silence between the lines of the message. "They are not just sick," Seok said. "Someone is choking them." Day turned. "Explain." Seok brought up a map of the region. Trade routes flickered in pale blue. Then, one by one, several lines went dark. "These corridors are blocked. Not by accident. Armed fleets are sitting on them. No civilian traffic gets through unless it pays or obeys." Mira felt a cold weight settle in her chest. "So even if we send doctors—" "They won't arrive," Seok finished. "Or they will arrive too late." The room stayed quiet. Outside the window, Earth turned slowly, bright and alive. Day Park watched it for a long moment before speaking. "They asked for medical aid," he said. "Only medical aid." Myra looked at him. "And what will we send?" Day did not answer right away. Far from Earth, in a crowded chamber of stone and metal, Counselor Una Kess waited for a reply that might never come. She was not human. Her people were tall and narrow, with skin like dull silver and eyes that reflected light instead of color. She had been awake for 3 cycles straight, moving between hospitals, refugee shelters, and council halls that grew emptier every day. Around her, the chamber smelled of disinfectant and fear. Screens showed cities under quarantine domes. Names of the dead scrolled too fast to read. "They will answer," one of her aides said, trying to sound hopeful. Humans are known for their compassion. Una did not look away from the main screen. "Compassion does not move fleets," she said. "And we asked them not to bring fleets." The memory of the vote still burned in her mind. Some counselors had begged to request full military protection. Others had warned that doing so would invite invasion, not help. In the end, fear had won. They asked only for doctors, medicine, and knowledge. Nothing more. A new alert sounded. Una straightened. The symbol on the screen was unfamiliar, but marked as human. Open channel. She said. The image of Day Park appeared, clear and steady. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture that had become common between species. "Counselor Una Kess," he said, "we have received your request." Relief rushed through the chamber like fresh air. Una felt her hands tremble. "Thank you," she said. "Every hour matters." "Our people are—" "We know," Day said gently. "We have reviewed your data." Mira Han appeared beside him, her face tired but focused. "We are preparing aid ships now." Una closed her eyes for a brief second. "You cannot know what this means to us." "There is something else," Day added. Una opened her eyes. "Go on. The space around your worlds is not safe," he said. "Your neighbors have taken positions along your main routes." A murmur spread through the chamber. Yuna's expression hardened. We are aware of their actions, but we cannot fight them. And we do not wish to turn this crisis into a war. Day's gaze did not change. Neither do we. Then you understand why we must ask again, Yuna said carefully. No warships. No shows of force. Only medical aid. For a moment, Day said nothing. Seok Lim watched the channel closely, noting stress patterns, breathing rates, small signs of fear. Humanity will help, Day said at last. You have our word. Yuna exhaled. That is enough. The channel closed. In the chamber, some counselors embraced. Others sat down, suddenly weak with relief. Yuna allowed herself to believe, just for a moment, that they might survive. Back on Earth, the room felt heavier. You did not answer her condition, Mira said. I did, Day replied. I gave my word. Seok turned from his console. Their enemies will test that word. They already see the coalition as dying prey. Myra's voice was quiet but firm. Doctors cannot work in a war zone. Day nodded. That is why we will not send them into one. Mira looked at him sharply. Day, he met her eyes. We will make it safe. The decision moved fast after that. Orders passed through layers of command. Shipyards that had been quiet for years came alive. Crews were recalled, not with speeches, but with short messages that carried weight. Aid was needed. Protection was required. Beyond human space. Watching sensors blink and fade, foreign commanders noticed unusual movement. Fleets that had been content to wait and starve the coalition began to adjust their positions. They are only sending doctors, one of them said with a thin smile. Let them come. None of them noticed the deeper shifts. None of them saw the long-range gates powering up, or the way human traffic patterns changed, like a tide pulling back before a storm. In her private quarters. Yuna Kess stood alone and listened to the distant sounds of emergency transports passing overhead. She whispered a quiet hope to the empty air. Please arrive in time. Far away, in the dark between stars, human ships began to move. Weeks passed as the human fleet moved through empty stretches of space, faster than any coalition world had expected. Scouts sent ahead detected silence and blockades, but the ships did not slow. They glided past the dangers like shadows that refused to be stopped. Inside the command bridge, Fleet Commander Tae-Ru stood with a calm posture, his eyes scanning the information on every screen. The human ships were not just fast, they were prepared for any threat. In the Karas coalition, anxiety rose like a tide. Counselor Yuna Kess watched from the observation dome as sensors picked up unfamiliar shapes approaching from the void. The shapes were too large, too organized to be anything but human. Alarm spread through her advisors. They had expected doctors. Not this. The first human vessels entered orbit with precision, avoiding major structures and communication hubs. They were sleek, dark, and intimidating. The coalition's military commanders whispered among themselves. What did the humans plan? They had not asked for soldiers, only medics and medicine. Yet these machines carried weapons powerful enough to level entire cities. Ambassador Day Park and Mira Han appeared in the coalition council chambers via long-range link. Their faces were calm, professional, almost gentle, but their presence carried weight. Every time they spoke, people leaned in to listen. Day's voice was even, almost soothing, yet firm. We have arrived, Day said. Our aid is here. Counselors exchanged uneasy glances. Yuna Kess swallowed. We only asked for doctors. Not. She gestured vaguely at the human ships. Day Park raised his hand slightly. We know. We did not send these vessels lightly. They will not attack unless forced to. Their purpose is to make your doctors safe. Mirahan added, your neighbors have blocked routes and threaten anyone entering. We cannot allow that. To bring medicine, we must first clear the path. For the first time in many cycles, Yuna felt a mix of hope and fear. She could not understand fully the scale of human thinking. They saw danger not as a problem to be negotiated, but as a problem to be removed. The human fleet moved closer to the Coalition's central planet. Scouts detected small enemy ships hiding in asteroid fields and orbiting the outposts. Human warships ignored most of the minor threats. When a vessel approached with intent to fire, it was neutralized quickly, silently. 1 second it existed. The next, it was gone. There were no explosions, no panic, only the knowledge that resistance was impossible. In the Coalition hospitals, Dr. Hana Choi and her team prepared for the arrival of human medical ships. They were trained, skilled, and experienced, but even they had doubts. Could medicine survive when warships moved in orbit above? Would they even be able to land safely? The first medical ships detached from their escorts and moved toward the planet's landing zones. They were slow and fragile compared to the human warships, but every move was protected. Small interceptors hovered, ready to block any attack. Coalition technicians watched from the control rooms. Amazed that such precise coordination existed. In orbit, Teru gave quiet orders. Engage only when necessary. Maintain perimeter. Do not fire unless fired upon. His voice was calm, almost casual. The crew followed with silent efficiency. Every maneuver was smooth, controlled. The human ships moved like predators that understood mercy. They were dangerous, yes, but deliberate. A small skirmish erupted near a mining station. A Coalition ally had been captured by local raiders, and the raiders attempted to flee with hostages. Human Marines deployed quickly in dropships. There was no chaos, only speed and precision. Within minutes, hostages were safe, raiders disarmed, and the threat removed without unnecessary bloodshed. Counselors who witnessed it could not hide their astonishment. Yuna Kess leaned back, realizing that these humans operated by a code she could not fully understand. Compassion was not weakness. Mercy was not soft. Strength could serve kindness, and kindness could guide strength. Ambassador Day Park appeared again on the channel. Medical teams will begin landings tomorrow. All zones will be secure. Civilians will be moved to protected areas. No one will be harmed if they cooperate. The council chamber erupted in relief. People spoke, cried, and prayed. Yuna Kess allowed herself a small smile. Perhaps help had come in the right form. After all, Teru observed from the bridge of his flagship. He did not smile. There was work to be done, and he would see it finished. He had no illusions about the danger around them. Every step was watched by enemy fleets, waiting for a chance to strike, but humans would not be caught unprepared. They never were. During the night, scouts reported more enemy movements. Some tried to hide in asteroid belts. Others attempted minor attacks on unprotected stations. Each time, human ships responded with precise, non-lethal force first. Weapons were aimed to disable engines, to block escape, to make threats harmless without destruction whenever possible. Those who resisted, who tried to strike back, found the humans unavoidable. No escape, no mercy for the aggressors. The balance was maintained, the path cleared. Coalition citizens began to see it. The humans were not conquerors. They were protectors. Their strength ensured that the medicine and doctors could arrive. Their presence brought both fear and safety. Children who had not slept without nightmares for months could finally rest. Patients who had been moved from quarantine zones watched as the human warships glided above, knowing that no enemy could touch them now. Mira Han visited one of the first landing zones personally. She watched doctors unload equipment, medical robots unfold sterile environments, and hospitals rise from temporary shelters. It was a slow process, But with human security, it moved faster than anyone expected. Unikess finally met Dr. Hana Choi face to face. Both women were tired, yet there was recognition. One was human, one alien. Both were fighting the same battle, to save lives. We did not believe humans would bring warships. Una said softly. Dr. Choi shook her head. It is not warships for war. They are warships for protection. They make sure our work is possible. For the first time, Una understood fully. Humans had a different view of helping. They did not separate compassion from power. They did not think of kindness as a weakness. They combined them. They used strength so others could live. The Coalition Council observed the landings from orbit. No explosions, no unnecessary fire. Just efficiency, coordination, and overwhelming human presence. Every small conflict was handled quickly and decisively. Every threat was neutralized. Every life was protected. And in that moment, for the first time in months, hope seemed possible. The first human medical ships touched down on the surface, under the careful watch of the warships above. The landing zones were crowded with coalition workers, volunteers, and civilians, but all moved in an organized chaos that was hard to disrupt. Dr. Hana Choi stepped from her ship, carrying only a small bag of essential supplies. But the weight of her presence was immense. She walked past the volunteers and crew, her eyes scanning every face. She saw fear, exhaustion, and hope all in one glance. Ambassador Day Park followed, not interfering with the operations, but making sure the coalition leaders understood the methods. He did not speak often. When he did, his voice was calm and unshakable. He explained how human doctors and medics worked, how every action was coordinated with both precision and care. Counselor Unikess observed everything, still wary, still unsure. She had spent so long fearing violence that the presence of armed humans nearby made her uneasy. Even if they were there to protect, the human Marines had taken positions around hospitals, supply zones, and refugee areas. They did not harass anyone, did not make threats, but their presence alone made enemies think twice. Coalition forces were stunned at the discipline and restraint of these soldiers. Every move was measured, every action calculated, and yet every threat was met with immediate and overwhelming force if necessary. The humans did not waste energy on arrogance. They focused on results. Dr. Choi began coordinating the medical teams. They set up field hospitals, decontamination zones, and triage stations. They used portable shelters and robotic systems to handle patients quickly. Volunteers worked tirelessly, guided by human specialists who made decisions with speed that no local team could match. Even with this rapid pace, the humans made sure that every patient received attention, that no life was ignored. Some local commanders protested the presence of armed humans. We did not call for soldiers, they reminded Day Park. This is not a battlefield. Day's response was quiet but firm. This would be a battlefield if we were not here. The first night was tense. Patrols flew silently above the cities, scanning for threats. Small fleets attempted to test the human perimeter, but they were stopped swiftly, quietly, and without unnecessary destruction. The coalition citizens watched in awe as these actions unfolded. They began to understand that the humans did not fight for conquest, but to make life possible. Every engagement was minimal, calculated to remove danger without harming the innocent. Unikess visited a hospital zone in the early hours. Dr. Choi and her team were already at work. Patients were being moved efficiently, treated, and stabilized. Machines monitored vital signs, while nurses administered medications with precision. Coalition doctors observed in amazement. Even the oldest, most experienced physicians had never seen such coordination and efficiency in a crisis. The humans' discipline became more apparent with each passing hour. Every volunteer knew their role. Every Marine, Medic and officer acted in perfect synchrony. Unikess began to realize that this was not just about technology or weapons. It was about understanding the value of every life and using power to protect it. The human approach was unlike anything she had ever seen. Meanwhile, scouts reported increased enemy activity on nearby asteroid belts and outposts. Groups of raiders attempted to disrupt supply lines, but the humans intercepted them with calculated precision. Weapons were aimed to disable engines and communications first. Only when necessary did they use more destructive measures. Every engagement left survivors, captives, or neutralized equipment, but very few casualties. It was a new kind of war one fought to make peace possible, not to win by fear. Park monitored communications with the coalition leaders continuously. He advised Unikess on crowd management, patient prioritization, and coordination between local and human forces. Mirahan moved between field hospitals, ensuring that medical supplies were allocated correctly and that human and coalition doctors worked as a single team. The efficiency was staggering, and even those who had doubted the humans began to understand their approach. In one district, a sudden outbreak of illness threatened hundreds. Human teams responded immediately, setting up emergency quarantine and treatment zones. Machines were deployed to sterilize areas, while medics treated patients on the spot. Coalition doctors helped, guided by human specialists, and within hours the outbreak was contained. The citizens could not hide their relief. Fear turned into gratitude, and gratitude began to grow into trust. The human Marines also played a role in education and community support. They helped teach volunteers how to handle dangerous materials safely, how to manage crowds, and how to stabilize patients until doctors arrived. Children, previously terrified of soldiers, now watched with fascination. They began to understand that humans used strength not for domination, but for protection. As the days passed, more medical ships landed under the protection of warships. Supply lines were established, and refugees moved to safe zones. The citizens began to regain hope. Coalition forces learned from the humans how to organize, prioritize, and act efficiently. Even the smallest victories, a saved life, a protected district, felt monumental. Unikess spent long hours observing. She noticed patterns in the humans' behavior: calm decision-making, refusal to panic, meticulous attention to detail. They acted quickly, decisively, and yet with a care that ensured no one was needlessly harmed. It was a combination of discipline, intelligence, and empathy that she had never seen in her own forces. One day, Dr. Choi approached her. "Counselor Kess, you are managing well, but allow us to take the lead here. Our goal is simple: protect life at any cost. We will fight only when necessary, but we will protect every person under our care." Yuna nodded, understanding more than she could have before. "I see that now. Your presence does not threaten us. It ensures that we can survive." The coalition began to accept the humans fully. Fear turned into cautious trust, and trust into cooperation. Hospitals became centers of learning as much as healing. Citizens watched the humans work, learning how to be prepared for crisis, how to manage resources, and how to protect the vulnerable. Meanwhile, scouts continued to detect enemy fleets lurking near the edges of the controlled zones. Attempts to disrupt the operation were frequent, but every time the humans responded with precision. Each failed attack reinforced the reality: human warships were not a threat to the innocent, but an unstoppable barrier to aggression. By the end of the first week, the coalition could finally breathe. Their people were being treated. Cities were stabilized. Refugees were safe. And the humans continued to hold the line. Unikess realized that she had underestimated the meaning of human strength. It was not just physical power. It was the determination to combine intelligence, skill, and empathy to ensure survival. In her council chamber, Unikess spoke to the leaders. We have asked for help, and now we see that it comes in ways we could not have imagined. The humans do not fight for themselves, but for us. Their strength protects our weakness, and in this, we find hope. Outside, the human fleet remained vigilant. Warships hovered in orbit, maintaining perimeter security, while medical ships continued to land. Every movement was deliberate, every action measured, and every threat countered without unnecessary destruction. They had arrived not just to deliver medicine, but to ensure life could continue, and that every effort would succeed. The citizens began to understand the human message. Compassion and strength could exist together. Protection did not require domination, and kindness did not demand weakness. Through human action, life was being preserved, hope was returning, and a lesson was written for all who observed. Humans had arrived not as conquerors, but as guardians. And in their presence, the coalition finally felt the possibility of survival. The enemy had been patient. For weeks, they watched from the edges of the coalition's space. They assumed that humans were fragile outside their own systems, that doctors and medics could be delayed, blocked, or scared away. They thought humans would respect the rules and would not act unless directly attacked. They were wrong. Fleet Commander Te-Ru received the reports calmly. Small fleets, masked by asteroid fields, had moved toward the coalition planets. They were lightly armed, but numbers were significant. Scouts confirmed that the enemy intended to strike before human medical ships could complete their missions. Te did not panic. He only made a single quiet statement to his officers: "Prepare to end this." In the coalition's council chambers, Unikess and her advisors monitored the enemy movements with growing fear. "They will attack tonight," one of her commanders said. "The medical teams are vulnerable." Day Park appeared on the link. His voice was even. "They will not reach them." Una swallowed, trying to read the calm behind his words. "How can you be certain?" "Because we will not allow it. They will see that our strength is not for conquest, but for protection." As night fell over the coalition planets, the human fleet moved into position. Warships glided silently into orbit, forming a protective ring that no enemy could penetrate without encountering overwhelming force. Scouts and interceptors positioned themselves near asteroid belts, ready to intercept any incoming attackers. Below, medical teams continued their work, unaware of the magnitude of the shield above them. The first skirmish began just after midnight. Enemy vessels attempted to break through a weakly defended zone, hoping for surprise. They were met immediately by human interceptors. Within moments, ships were disabled, engines and weapon systems frozen. The enemy tried to flee, but human tactics left them no escape routes. Every move was anticipated, every reaction calculated. There was no chaos, no panic, only the methodical, quiet efficiency of humans who understood the rules of war and the purpose behind every action. On the surface, Dr. Hana Choi and her teams treated patients unaware of the battles above. Volunteers and coalition doctors worked in unison with human medics, moving quickly, treating infections, stabilizing the sick. Every time a report came from orbit, human personnel on the ground reassured them, maintaining calm and order. Children who had been afraid of every shadow now watched the skies with fascination, seeing the humans as guardians. Bay Park monitored communications, speaking rarely but firmly. His calm presence reassured Unikess and her council. Every human vessel followed the rules of engagement precisely, striking only to neutralize threats. No civilian structures were harmed. No patient or volunteer was touched. Every action was purposeful, deliberate, and restrained. The enemy tried again, this time with a larger fleet, attempting to surround one of the medical ships. Human warships responded immediately. They did not panic. They did not rush. They moved in patterns that the enemy could not predict, disabling weapons, cutting communications, and isolating the attackers. Within hours, the assault was over. Enemy ships were either disabled or fleeing, and human ships held their position, continuing to protect the medical zones. UNICEF began to understand the magnitude of what humans could do. Their discipline and focus were unmatched. They did not need to destroy everything to ensure safety. They only needed to remove the danger. Coalition soldiers watched and learned. Their own forces, previously scattered and untrained, began to adopt human methods. Coordination, precision, and restraint became lessons in practice, not theory. During the day, human medics continued their work without interruption. They treated the sick, organized supplies, and trained volunteers. Every action was protected by the warships above. Even the smallest operations, such as moving patients between shelters, were covered by disciplined human teams who anticipated every possible threat. No one could challenge them, and everyone began to trust them. The enemy launched one final attempt, combining all remaining forces to overwhelm a sector. Te-Ru authorized a decisive response. Human warships moved with precision, disabling enemy fleets before they could reach the planets. Machines and weapons were used in perfect coordination. Every attack was countered efficiently, leaving no time for chaos or error. By the time the enemy realized what had happened, they were surrounded, powerless, and without options. Captured enemy leaders were brought to a secure human vessel. They were treated with restraint and respect, not executed or abused. Human law dictated the procedures, but the message was clear. Strength was not cruelty, and power did not justify violence. Coalition observers watched in disbelief. They had never seen captives treated with such fairness in the middle of a war. UNICEF addressed her council in the aftermath. Her voice was calm, but filled with relief. We have seen a different way of fighting. We have seen that power can serve life, not destruction. Humans have shown us that strength and compassion can exist together. Day Park appeared on the link one final time. Our work is not finished, but this phase is complete. Your people are safe. Medical aid can now proceed without threat. We will continue to ensure security until your coalition can manage it themselves. The coalition leaders nodded, understanding that the humans had rewritten the rules of engagement. Compassion, combined with overwhelming strength, had changed the outcome of what could have been a devastating conflict. The lesson was clear. Humans did not fight for conquest, but to protect those who could not defend themselves. Medical operations continued without interruption. Field hospitals expanded, supplies reached remote areas, and training for local volunteers ensured that the coalition could begin to manage its own recovery. Citizens regained hope, seeing life returning to places that had been abandoned to sickness and fear. Above. Human warships maintained vigilance. They were ready for any threat, but did not overreact. Every crew member understood the mission: protect life at all costs. Every maneuver was deliberate, every action purposeful. The enemy had tested them, and humans had responded with efficiency, precision, and mercy. UNICEF watched the fleets from the observation dome. She realized that she had misunderstood the nature of humans. Their strength was unlike any other. It was disciplined, deliberate, and used only to preserve life. Compassion was their guiding principle, and power was the tool to enforce it. The lesson was written in fire and steel above her, but it was not destruction, it was protection. For the first time in many cycles, the coalition could breathe freely. Their people were safe. Medical teams could work. Refugees were secure. And humans, though armed and powerful, acted not as conquerors, but as guardians. They had brought medicine, yes, but more importantly, they had brought the certainty of survival, the safety of life, and the proof that strength could serve kindness rather than fear. The conflict had ended, but work continued. Human warships remained in orbit, ensuring that the coalition could continue to rebuild without interference. Medical ships moved freely now, carrying supplies, medicines, and personnel to every corner of the coalition worlds. Every operation was efficient, every action purposeful, and every life given value. The citizens began to understand that the humans had come not to conquer, but to preserve. Counselor Una Kess walked through the central hospital zone, observing the progress. Tents had been replaced with modular buildings, temporary shelters now functioning as permanent hospitals. Patients moved freely, treated efficiently, and cared for with compassion. Doctors and volunteers worked alongside human medics, learning techniques and methods that would allow them to continue on their own once the humans departed. Dr. Hana Choi was everywhere at once, coordinating teams, teaching, and overseeing treatments. She did not stop to rest. Her movements were methodical, calm, and confident. Citizens began to trust her, seeing in her not just a doctor, but a symbol of hope. Myra Han accompanied her, guiding the coalition's teams and ensuring that operations ran smoothly. Together, they represented the heart of the human effort. Fleet Commander Tae Roo and his officers monitored space from the flagship. Enemy fleets had either been neutralized or fled. Scouts continued to patrol nearby systems to ensure that no new threats could disrupt the operation. Tae knew that true peace would take time, but humans would leave only when the coalition was capable of maintaining its own security. Ambassador Dae Park communicated with the coalition leaders regularly. His messages were calm, clear, and focused. He emphasized cooperation, preparation, and understanding. Through him, the coalition began to see the human philosophy. Strength could serve life, and power could protect rather than destroy. The citizens began to rebuild not only physically, but mentally. The trauma of illness and war slowly faded as they saw that they could survive and even thrive under careful protection. Human efforts had taught them more than medical procedures. They learned organization, planning, and how to value life alongside security. The human presence had instilled confidence that had been missing for cycles. In council meetings, Una Kess addressed her peers. We have been saved not just by medicine, but by understanding. Humans have shown us that power does not have to be feared, that strength can be used to protect, and that kindness is a choice backed by ability. We will remember this lesson. The coalition began to implement changes based on human methods. Medical teams were reorganized, supply chains secured, and emergency protocols put into place. Citizens began to take responsibility for their own safety, guided by lessons learned from human discipline. Even local defense forces adapted, understanding that coordination and restraint were as powerful as weapons. Children played in the streets of newly rebuilt districts, their laughter echoing where fear had once dominated. Citizens moved freely without worry, knowing that they were protected. Human marines and medics continued their work, but their presence was no longer intimidating. It was reassuring. The people had grown to trust them, and that trust was hard-earned and well-deserved. Captured enemy leaders were held in secure facilities, treated with fairness and respect. Trials were conducted to ensure justice, and lessons were learned without resorting to cruelty. Coalition citizens watched closely, understanding that humanity could wield power without succumbing to violence. The humans had proven that rules and discipline could enforce both safety and justice. As weeks passed, human medical teams trained more local personnel. Knowledge transfer became the focus. Coalition doctors learned advanced techniques, medical logistics, and emergency response strategies. Volunteers were empowered to take responsibility for their communities. The humans were preparing to leave, but not before ensuring that the coalition could maintain its own recovery and security. Una Kess observed the final stages of the operation. She reflected on what had happened. Humans had arrived when all hope seemed lost. They had not only delivered medicine, but had ensured that medicine could reach those who needed it most. They had fought, yes, but only to make life possible. They had combined compassion with strength, mercy with discipline, and in doing so, had taught a galaxy a lesson that would not be forgotten. Finally, the day came when human warships began to depart. Citizens gathered to watch the vessels move into hyperspace, leaving behind a stable, secure, and recovering coalition. There were cheers, tears, and waves of gratitude. Unicast stood at the observation dome, feeling both relief and admiration. Ambassador Day Park appeared one last time on the council screens. "We leave you with the knowledge and strength you need to continue," he said. "Medicine and protection are not separate. Remember that our ships were here not to conquer, but to ensure life. Humanity believes that every life is valuable, and that strength should serve it." Teyru's fleet formed a precise formation before disappearing into the stars. Human marines and medics waved from landing zones, small gestures that carried immense meaning. Dr. Hana Choi and Mirahan stayed until the last team of coalition volunteers were ready to take full responsibility for the operations. Every detail had been addressed. Nothing left to chance. As the humans left, Unicast spoke to her council one final time. "We expected aid in the form of medicine. We received something greater. We received understanding, protection, and a model of strength guided by compassion. This is the true legacy of humanity." The coalition would continue to recover and grow stronger, but the memory of human intervention remained. Stories spread across planets of fleets that arrived when help was requested, of soldiers who fought only to protect, and of medics who healed without fear. The galaxy's perception of humans changed forever. Compassion was not weakness. Strength was not cruelty. When combined, they became unstoppable. In quiet moments, children played under the shadow of empty landing zones. Soldiers trained in new methods, and doctors practiced techniques learned from humans. Every life saved, every lesson taught, every act of protection became part of the legacy left behind. The humans had arrived not for conquest, not for glory, but to ensure that life could continue. And through their actions, the coalition learned that mercy could be enforced with strength, and hope could be backed by power. They had not just sent medicine, they had sent understanding, and in that, they had rewritten what it meant to be powerful in the galaxy.